For the first time in Asia, connect your landphone and smartphone through SLT Wi-Fi with the SLT Voice app.
Neighbourhood first. Indian Premier Narendra Modi keeps terrorism and security high on the agenda during talks with Sri Lankan President and former President in Colombo. Be huntsmen, not fishermen. With Zaharan's information in hand, Sri Lanka could have employed strategy that did not dismantle law enforcement.
The mentality of those who handled national security before 2015, it was the mentality of a hunter. But today, they are fishermen.
Intelligence sharing. India's NIA finds link between two Sri Lankanese bombers and some Indians, shares contact numbers of more linked to Islamic State. An after effect. MACAU pulls out a FIFA World Cup qualifier match in Sri Lanka due to security concerns. All this and much more coming up tonight on First at 9, this Sunday, the 9th of June 2019.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9.
මොහොන සති කීපයකට කලින් Fair and Lovely men ගෑවට පස්සේ මාක්ස් අඩු වෙලා ෆෙයානස් වැඩි වෙලා.
මාක්ස් අඩු කරලා ඔයාගේ ෆෙයානස් ස්ටෑන්ඩඩ් එක වැඩි කරගන්න. Fair and Lovely men anti marks cream.
Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
A warm welcome. Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India left for New Delhi after concluding his first foreign visit following his re-election, during which he travelled to Sri Lanka and the Maldives and held talks with the top leadership of the two countries. The Indian Premier arrived in Sri Lanka today upon the invitation by President Maithripala Sirisena, who was also in India recently to attend the new government swearing-in ceremony. The Indian Premier is the first foreign head of state to visit Sri Lanka after the deadly Easter Sunday attacks on the 21st of April. His visit is considered as a sign of India's affirmation of solidarity with Sri Lanka in the wake of terror attacks.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrived in Sri Lanka today, the second leg of his first two-nation trip after returning to power for a second term. In his third visit to Sri Lanka in 4 years, the Indian Prime Minister was received by his Sri Lankan counterpart, Ranil Wickremesinghe, at the Bandaranaike International Airport at 11 a.m. The Indian Premier commenced his official duties by visiting the St. Anthony's Church in Kochikade, which was one of the main targets during the Easter Sunday attacks, to pay tribute to the victims of the brutal attack. Archbishop of Colombo, His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjit, was also present during the occasion. Taking to Twitter, Modi expressed confidence that Sri Lanka will rise again against cowardly acts of terror. The ceremonial welcome for the Indian Prime Minister was later held at the Presidential Secretariat, where he was accorded with a Guard of Honour and 19-gun salute. Following the ceremony, Modi arrived at the President's official residence in Colombo, where a sapling was planted at the premises to mark his visit. Bilateral discussions between President Sirisena and Prime Minister Narendra Modi had heavily focused on regional security, peace and stability. The two leaders had condemned terrorism in all its forms and stated that the two countries will strengthen cooperation to address the threat. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister's office announced that discussions between Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe and his Indian counterpart was held while on their way to the Indian High Commission in Colombo. The two leaders had focused primarily on economic development, where Modi had assured India's fullest support to further strengthen bilateral development partnership through people-oriented projects in Sri Lanka. Once in the Indian High Commission, Narendra Modi held discussions with opposition leader Mahinda Rajapaksa, where they spoke on the need for close collaboration between India and Sri Lanka in the fields of counter-terrorism, security and economic development. Representatives of the Tamil National Alliance also met with the Indian Prime Minister at the High Commission. Modi also addressed the Indian community in Sri Lanka before departing the island this afternoon. Modi took to Twitter to say that his short visit to Sri Lanka was immensely fruitful and gave his assurance that India will always be supportive of Sri Lanka's progress. India is pursuing what it calls a neighbourhood-first foreign policy centred on its allies in South Asia. During Modi's official one-day visit to Maldives yesterday, India and the Maldives signed a slew of agreements encompassing ferry services, port terminals and a new national cricket stadium. The Indian Prime Minister was also conferred with Nishan Izzuddin, the Maldives, the highest honour accorded to foreign dignitaries.
National security expert Professor Rohan Gunaratne lamented the state of the current national security structure of Sri Lanka, saying that the military should be given a prominent role in nation building without destabilizing military. Professor Gunaratne, who was speaking at a seminar in Kandy yesterday, further added that those responsible for national security should also inculcate a hunter mentality if they are to address terrorism in the country.
We have a military, law enforcement and intelligence service that has fought a war for 27 years. But since 2015, I saw that the national security structure of this country has been downgraded. Because we followed a Western ideal that the military should not operate in nation building. Military should have never been withdrawn to the barracks. We must permit our military to operate in this country, both in times of war and in times of peace. But in peace, in a role of nation building. Because that also gives us a very good interface to listen to the pulse of the people and also to collect information and intelligence, which is vital. Before 2015, if we had some information that there's a man called Zahran and his team was identified and that he was going to do suicide attacks against churches, the response would have been very different. The mentality of those who handled national security before 2015, it was the mentality of a hunter. But today, those who handle security, they are fishermen. They will put the rod, fishing rod, and go to sleep until the fish come and bite it. So you must understand there's a big difference in the mindset of those who handle security before and now. The threat of an imminent terrorist attack is over because since the attacks, the military, the law enforcement, intelligence services have been given the powers and they have dismantled Zahran and his group completely. But the ecosystem or the radicalization pipeline that produced Zahran has not been dismantled. But for this, government will have to pass the new laws and work very closely with the religious establishment, with the education establishment, with the media and the cyber establishment. This requires visionary leadership and collective leadership.
Minister of Plantation Industries Navin Dissanayake says that all investigations related to the attacks must be expedited as Muslim ministers have resigned from their positions in government to assist in the probe. Addressing an event in Kandy today, the minister also went on to urge that severe punishment be given against any minister who is found responsible for the brutal attacks, regardless of their religious background.
පාස්කුරිදා 21 වෙනිදායි පසුව සාමාන්‍ය තත්ත්වයකට ඉතාමත් ඉක්මනින් මේ රට පරිවර්තනය වෙනවා. මේ මුස්ලිම් ඇමතිවරු සියලු දෙනාම දැන් ඉල්ලාස් වෙලා සිටිනවා. සියලු මුස්ලිම් ඇමතිවරු මහින්ද රාජපක්ෂ විපක්ෂ නායකතුමා ගිහලා හම්බුණා. ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ ප්‍රශ්න විපක්ෂ නායකතුමාට ඉදිරිපත් කරා. මේ ප්‍රශ්න අපිට විසඳන්න පුළුවන් සාකච්ඡා මාර්ගයෙන් පමණයි. අපි දිගටම කියනවා විශේෂයෙන්ම මධ්‍යස්ථ මතධාරීන්ට අපි ඉඩ දෙන්න අවශ්‍යයි. අපගේ මුස්ලිම් සහෝදරයන්ගෙන් ඉල්ලනවා අරාබිකරණය මේ මුස්ලිම් සමාජයට කරන්න එපා. නමුත් මේ රටේ සම්ප්‍රදායික මුස්ලිම් ආගමක් තිබ්බා. අපි ඒකට ගරු කරනවා. අන්තවාදයට අපිට ඉඩ දෙන්න බෑ. මහින්ද රාජපක්ෂ මැතිතුමා මේ මුස්ලිම් නායකයන් එක්ක කර සාකච්ඡාව හොඳයි. විපක්ෂයේ සිටින සියලු දෙනාටම පේනවා මුස්ලිම් නායකයන් ඉල්ලාස් වෙලා ඒ අවස්ථාව ලබා දීලා තියෙනවා ඒ සියලුම පරීක්ෂණ කරන්න. දැන් එහෙනම් මේ පරීක්ෂණ කරලා අවසන් කරන්න ඕනේ. යම්කිසි ඇමතිවරයෙක් මුස්ලිම් සිංහල හෝ ක්‍රිස්තියානි වේවා ඒගොල්ලන්ට විරුද්ධව යම්කිසි චෝදනා තියෙනවා නම් ඒගොල්ලන් වැරදි කරලා තියෙනවා නම් ඒගොල්ලන්ට දැඩි දඩුවම් දෙන්න අවශ්‍යයි.
India's intelligence has shared phone numbers of 5 Sri Lankan suspects to be associated with Islamic State, including call logs and details of some Indians who were in touch with the families of 2 suicide bombers involved in the Easter Sunday attacks. A national investigation agency team from India was in Sri Lanka last week in connection with the agency's probe into 2 Islamic State modules in India that are suspected to have had connections in Sri Lanka. According to Indian media outlet Indian Express, the information have been shared with Sri Lankan authorities for further investigation. An Indian government official was quoted as saying whether these numbers belong to those associated with the Easter bombings in any way is not known yet. The National Investigation Agency of India has also found that some suspects in India have been in touch with the family of Inshaf and Ilham Ibrahim, 2 brothers who were among the suicide bombers. The article went on to say that the electronic devices of the suicide bombers were found to be taken away by the US Federal Bureau of Investigation assisting Sri Lanka in the probe, and unless the data from these devices is made available, little will be known of the bombers to India's links. UPFA parliamentarian Bandulu Gunawardena warns of a possible political crisis from next week owing to issues surrounding the legislature, the executive and judiciary in the country. During a media briefing held at the parliamentary premises today, the parliamentarian went on to say that it is time for everyone in parliament to get together to pass a proposal to hold parliamentary elections as soon as possible.
ලබන්නා වූ සතියේ ඉඳන් අපේ රටේ ජාතික දේශපාලනය තුල ඉතිහාසයේ නොවිරු අර්බුදයක් නිර්මාණය වන ලකුණු පහළ වෙලා තිබෙනවා. වෙන වචන පාවිච්චි කළොත් ව්‍යවස්ථාදායකයේ විධායකයේ සහ අධිකරණයේ ගැටුමක් නිසා රට අරාජික වෙනවා. විශේෂ කැබිනට් රැස්වීමක් පවත්වලා ඉතා පැහැදිලිව ව්‍යවස්ථාදායකයා හා විධායකයේ අතර තියෙන ගැටුම समस्त लोकेට ආවරණය කරලා තියෙනවා මේ වන විට. වහාම පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ අපි සියලු දෙනා එකතු වෙලා යෝජනාවක් සම්මත කරගෙන පාර්ලිමේන්තු මැතිවරණයක් ලබා දුන්නොත් මේ රටේ ජනතාව තීන්දුව කරයි කාටද රට අරාජික තත්වයට පත් නොවි ගෙන යා හැකි නායකත්වයේ කුමක්ද කියන එක රටේ ජනතාවට ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදී ලෙස තීරණය කරන්න ඉඩ ප්‍රස්තාව ලබා දීම තමයි වඩාම යෝග්‍ය.
President Maithripala Sirisena's recent remarks related to the closure of carpentry workshops attracted much criticism in the past few days. Carpenters in MORATUWA launched a SATYAGRAHA campaign yesterday in protest of the President's statements and called for clarification to his decision. Speaking to First at 9, State Minister of Finance Iran Vikramaratne moved to clarify the President's remarks, saying that licenses will not be issued to new carpentry workshops and that therefore it will not affect existing carpentry businesses in the industry.
Carpenters in Moratuwa, along with the Mayor of the Moratuwa Municipal Council, Saman Lal Fernando, councillors and religious leaders staged a satyagraha opposite the Municipal Council last evening in protest over the President's statement on closing down carpentry workshops. Providing clarification on the President's statement, the Ministry of Mahawali Development and Environment issued a communique stating that the ban will not be imposed on traditional carpentry shops but on mobile timber mills with effect from the 31st of December 2022. However, protesters continue to engage in a satyagraha today, citing that they were not satisfied with the announcement. Meanwhile, officers of the Moratuwa police station handed a court order to the mayor, requesting him to appear before Moratuwa Magistrates Court tomorrow and requested that protests can be carried out in a manner that does not disrupt vehicular movement. Colombo district organizer of SLFP Sujit Pushpakumara, who arrived at the site of the protest, said that following discussions with the Secretary of the Ministry of Mahawali Development and Environment, steps will be taken to make amendments without impacting traditional carpentry. Protesters, however, claim that the satyagraha will continue until they receive a written confirmation on the amendments. Giving clarification on the President's recent remarks on carpentry, State Minister of Finance Iran Vikramaratne says that the President did not refer shutting down the carpentry shops, but not providing license for new workshops.
While we need to protect our forests in the greater interest of all the population in this country, we also need to understand that we need trees and we need wood for the industry. Therefore, replanting must be done vigorously so that there can be a supply of wood for the carpentry industry. There is no question about closing the small workshops of carpenters. These people live on these incomes, and we must protect that profession. The President's comments related to not licensing new carpentry workshops. So therefore, we must emphasize that the workshops that are there now will not be affected. Those who have chainsaws were required to register their chainsaws. Tens of thousands of them have already been registered. So when they have to receive a new chainsaw, that registration could be utilized. I'm making a request from the President and the Environmental Ministry that they will look at assisting the industry, particularly in terms of marketing, particularly for the small carpenter, to enable and strengthen carpentry industry in Moratuwa. Moratuwa is really the capital of this industry, and therefore we should provide all the support we can to strengthen this industry.
Meanwhile, addressing an event in Moratuwa yesterday, the President moved to offer clarification behind his decision to impose new rules and regulations pertaining to deforestation.
මේ හැම දෙයක්ම කරන්නේ ගස් කැපීම නවත්තන්න. මම ඊයේ පෙරේදා කිව්වා මේ ලංකාවේ වඩුමඩු අලුතෙන් ලියාපදිංචි කරන්නේ නැහැ. තහනම් කියපුවා මට හෝ ගාලා දැන් ගහන්න පටන් අරන්. මම මේ නීති දාන්නේ මිනිසුන්ගේ හුස්ම ගැනීමේ අයිතිය ආරක්ෂා කරන්න. අවුරුද්දකට 100ට 1.5ක් කැලේ කපනවා. එතකොට තව අවුරුදු 15ක් ගියා මේ රට කාන්තාරයක්. ඒව නවත්ත ගන්නයි මම මේ නීති රීති දාන්නේ.
Dambulu police arrested 3 suspects who demanded a 100 million rupee ransom from the chief incumbent of the Rangiri Dambulu Rajamahawihara, Venerable Ambagaswewa Rahula Thera. According to the police, the chief incumbent of the Rangiri Dambulu Rajamahawihara received death threats over a phone call on the 20th of last month by an organization who identified themselves as Jawad. The suspects who were arrested last night were remanded until the 19th of this month after they were produced before the magistrate court in Dambulu. The suspects were identified as Chanaka Prasanna, Atula Jayashanta and Mihindu Gunaratna, aged between 19 and 35 years. And we will be back with the very latest in sports and business after the short break. Market analysts expect the Colombo Stock Exchange to experience slow buying interest and weak turnover levels over the course of next week amidst prevailing political uncertainty in Sri Lanka. Now, during the week past, the All Share Price Index and the more liquid S&P SL20 Index lost 0.24% and 0.40% respectively, whilst recording an average daily turnover of 167 million rupees. And now to take a look at how markets will perform in the coming week, we have Heruni Pereira from a market for the market forecast from First Capital Holdings.
Bond market is likely to be stagnant in the coming week as market participants will follow a wait-and-see approach ahead of the next week bond auction. We expect equity market also to be stagnant in the coming week with the negative sentiment arising from the prevailing political uncertainty. We expect buying interest to be slow and turnover levels also to be weak, with investor interest mainly to be centered on selected blue-chip counters.
And after days of wrangling over the wrongdoing of a communique on the G20 summit in Japan, finance chiefs from the world's largest economies warned today that escalating trade and geopolitical tensions pose the biggest risk to global growth. The communique also said that G20 finance leaders had agreed to compile common rules by 2020 to close loopholes used by global tech giants such as Facebook and Google to reduce their corporate taxes.
Trade issues dominated discussions at the G20 summit in the port city of Fukuoka in southwestern Japan in the past 2 days. The gathering also marked the first meeting of top US and Chinese officials since negotiations between both governments for a trade agreement collapsed last month. Yesterday, International Monetary Fund Managing Director Christine Lagarde warned that the increasing presence of technology giants using big data and artificial intelligence could cause a significant disruption to the world's financial system.
Tech firms, very large ones, that will eventually be disruptive in the financial landscape because they will be using a lot of their ample resources as well as massive access to data in order to actually penetrate a field where there is market share that is for grab.
Group of 20 finance ministers also agreed to push ahead on compiling common rules that will close loopholes that global technology giants like Facebook use to reduce the corporate tax burden.
Welcome back. In your international news, thousands have taken to the street of Hong Kong today to oppose a controversial extradition bill that would enable China to extradite fugitives from the city. The terrorists are expected to be the biggest since the 2014 umbrella movement, which saw hundreds of thousands take to the streets. Critics say the bill will leave anyone on Hong Kong's soil vulnerable to being grabbed by the Chinese authorities for political reasons or inadvertent business offences and undermine the city's semi-autonomous legal system. The bill has caused political gridlock, outcry among the city's usually pro-conservative business community. The government says the bill is designed to plug loopholes in the current law by allowing Hong Kong to decide on a case-by-case basis whether or not to send fugitives to terrorists where it doesn't have formal extradition deals. And in the UK, Boris Johnson, the lead candidate to succeed Theresa May as Britain's next Prime Minister, said he would withhold a previously agreed $50 billion Brexit payment until the European Union gives Britain's better exit terms. The payment represents outstanding British liabilities to the EU, which would be paid over a number of years according to the withdrawal agreement negotiated by May. This comes at a time where the EU has repeatedly said that it will not reopen discussion of the Brexit transition deal it reached with May last year, which British lawmakers have rejected 3 times, prompting May to announce her resignation earlier this month. Britain is due to leave the European Union on the 31st of October. And scores of Venezuelans flocked to the border with Colombia after President Nicolas Maduro ordered to reopen it yesterday, nearly 4 months after the opposition sought to use this crossing to bring humanitarian aid into the country. The border crossing into Cúcuta, Colombia, has become a lifeline for many Venezuelans who crossed to buy food, medicine and seek some respite from the economic malaise back home. The crossing is only open to pedestrians, but trailers that were laid across border roads to block aid from Colombia to Venezuela are still in place. According to the United Nations, this week, 4 million Venezuelan refugees and migrants have fled economic and humanitarian crisis in their homeland. We have more coming up on First at 9 right after this short commercial break. Welcome back. In sports, Sri Lanka's fast bowler Pradeep has been ruled out of their match against Bangladesh on Tuesday in Bristol after he suffered a dislocation on his bowling hand at training today. An injury to Pradeep will be a serious blow to Sri Lanka's World Cup hopes, with the fast bowler having bowled the decisive spell in Sri Lanka's only victory of the tournament so far against Afghanistan. Pradeep picked up 4 wickets for 31 and was awarded with the man of the match that encounter. Taking you to football, MACAU has decided to not send their football team to contest a World Cup qualifying match against Sri Lanka, citing security concerns in the island. The Chinese enclave was due to play Sri Lanka in the second leg of the qualifying first round on Tuesday. Issuing a statement via Facebook, the MACAU Football Association said the discussions are being held with FIFA, the Asian Football Confederation and the Football Federation of Sri Lanka to switch the match to a neutral venue. MACAU hosted Sri Lanka in the first leg of the qualifier found in a round in Qatar on Thursday and secured their first ever World Cup qualifying win thanks to a second half goal from defender Felipe Duarte. And on to the Cricket World Cup. Electing to bat first, India scored 352 runs for the loss of 5 wickets in their allotted 50 overs as they locked horns with Australia at the Oval in London today. Getting a perfect start for the team, Indian openers Shikhar Dhawan and Rohit Sharma built a 127-run partnership for the first wicket, when the other side is on 149 for the loss of 2 wickets at present. And that wraps up tonight's edition of First at 9. Thank you for joining us. Do log on to www.AdaDerana.lk for the very latest. Good night.